Hey guys, I'm making this video today to help anyone who is struggling to get a window pane in their Bosch Artiste or Bosch mixer. So in my mixer, I have ingredients for my easy whole wheat sandwich bread recipe with no additives. So in my mixer, I have my water, oil, honey, eggs, flour. I have not added in my salt and my yeast. I'm going to get everything mixed up first and allow it to rest before I add those ingredients. Hopefully this video will be helpful for anyone who is struggling with their Bosch Artiste. I do want to add that I am using cold water. I like to use cold water when using a Bosch or the Nutrimil. And the reason for that is sometimes the dough can get pretty heated when mixing, especially if you are using the lid, which I'm not going to use. Um, but if you're using the lid, the dough can get pretty hot, which can cause your dough to overproof or cause issues with getting a strong window pane. So I'm going to go ahead and mix my ingredients until they are incorporated. I'm going to start off on speed 1 on this Nutrimil Artiste. Also, before I forget, this recipe is going to be linked in the description down below if you want the details of everything, of all of the ingredients that I have in here. Also, I'm not using the vitamin C powder. It's listed in the ingredients as optional. Just for demonstration purposes, I chose not to use it just to show that you can get a great window pane and great bread without adding any additives. I'm going to go ahead and increase it now to speed 2 now that all of the flour is fully incorporated. Okay, have some ingredients that are climbing up the top here, so I'm just scraping down the sides of my bowl. Okay, so all of our flour is fully incorporated now, so I'm going to allow this to rest. Now, if you are new to making bread, it's very important to get a feel for how your dough looks. So right now, this is how it looks. It's very mushy. If I were to try to stretch it, it does not stretch. Now, the reason we want a good window pane is it helps the dough to rise. So if we were to make bread and this is the consistency of our dough and our dough goes to rise, it immediately breaks. So it doesn't allow it to rise. Now, when we have a beautiful window pane where the dough can stretch, that allows it to be able to stretch in the oven and give us that nice rise, which produces a nice fluffy bread. Gluten development is everything when it comes to getting a nice fluffy loaf of bread. If the gluten is not well developed, it will produce a more dense, more crumbly loaf of bread. Still edible, still a great loaf, but if what you're going for is something that's more light and fluffy and not crumbly, you definitely want to make sure that you have a good window pane. So I'm going to allow this to rest. I'm going to use my lid now. I'm going to cover it for 15 to 20 minutes. And this step is called an autolyse, and this allows the flour to absorb the water, and it also kind of gives you a head start on that gluten development. So I have not added in my salt and my yeast. I'm going to add that in after this 20-minute rest. So I'll be back shortly. Okay, so I'm back now. The dough has rested for about 15 minutes or so. Now, the longer autolyse you do, the longer rest you do, the faster the kneading will be, because the longer it sits, the more gluten will already be developed. So we looked at our dough earlier, so let's look at it again. And hopefully you guys can see that here. I'll get a big piece and pull it up because I can already see that the gluten is already started to develop. So this is without kneading. We've only mixed our ingredients. And as you can see, we've already got somewhat of a window pane. And this is after about 15 minutes. So we won't have to knead for very long. Again, I'm going to remind you guys, in my mixer, I I'm not using any sunflower lecithin or vital wheat gluten. I'm doing my no additives whole wheat sandwich bread. So in here I have 880 grams of fresh milled hard white flour, 500 grams of cold water, 62 grams of oil, 94 grams of honey, and 2 eggs. I'm not using the vitamin C powder. So that's what we have in here currently. And this is after a 15-minute rest. We already have a little bit of a window pane. Now, I know that it can be stronger, and we want it to be stronger so that our bread can rise. Because if we leave it here, it limits how much our bread can rise. Because when our bread rises, the dough stretches. But if it stretches here and then breaks, that lets us know that our dough cannot rise very much. So we're going to knead this to get an even more beautiful window pane. And before I do that, I'm going to add in my salt and my yeast. All right, and so I estimate that this will take maybe uh, somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes to get to window pane. So I'm going to knead on speed 2. Now, if you're new to working with fresh milled flour, I would encourage you not to go too far away from the mixer. You want to watch the dough as it's kneading. That way you can get a feel for how the dough changes as it's kneading. That way you can prevent it from over kneading. You'll also notice a change in texture and even a slight change in color once you've gotten a good window pane. The dough will look a little bit lighter in color when you have a good window pane. You can see as it's going, there's not flour, but there's dough stuck to the bottom of the bowl. That's an indication that it's not ready yet. So once it starts completely pulling away from the sides of the bowl. So these are just some things to look out for so that you can know when you have good gluten development. Okay, I'm going to pause it here. It's not there yet, but again, I want you guys to understand what your dough should look like. So we have a slightly better window pane. But I'm not going to stop here because it still breaks very easily. We want it to be stronger. And as you can see at the bottom of my bowl, it is still sticking. And with this recipe, it should be able to pull away completely. I'm going to get my thermometer also to see how warm we're getting. So you guys can see how the temperature does change the more you knead, which is why I started with cold water. So right now my dough is 82 degrees. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so as you can see, the dough is looking a lot smoother. See if I can get this closer for you guys. Look at how much smoother our dough looks. This is a really good indication that we are having good gluten development. I'm going to go ahead and get the temperature again. And now we're at 83 degrees, which is fine. And our dough looks very, very smooth. And now look at how far I can stretch it. This is going to produce a very nice loaf of bread. It will, of course, break eventually. It's not going to stretch from one wall, one wall to the next, but the texture is very smooth. You can see the strands of gluten. Very smooth texture. It may even look lighter in color. I always get comments saying that my dough looks lighter um, than your dough at home, and I think it has to do with gluten development, because when you don't have good gluten development, the dough is a slightly different color. And I know that sounds strange, but it really is. And so beautiful window pane. And this is without any additives. Look at how thin that gets. Okay. So if you are struggling to get a good window pane in your Bosch or Nutrimel Artiste, I hope this helps. It literally took less than 10 minutes to get this window pane. Looking at the time now, and it took about 6.5 minutes to get this window pane. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with allowing this to do the first rise. If you want to see the full recipe video for this, I will have that linked in the description box as well. I do have a full recipe video for this dough, but I really wanted to focus on just getting a window pane in the Nutrimil Artiste and Bosch mixers because, again, I've been getting a lot of comments and messages saying that you guys are struggling. Some of you guys are struggling with the Bosch and Nutrimil Artiste mixer. So hopefully this helps. If you guys have any questions, please ask them in the comments down below. Also, for a faster response, you guys can find me on Facebook at Lovely Bell Bakes. You can send me a message through my Facebook page, and I will likely get to you guys sooner that way. And also that way, you guys are able to send me pictures of your dough if you guys need some troubleshooting help. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, get your hands in there, really feel your dough, really look at your dough and watch how it changes. That will really give you a good feel of what your dough should look like. And that will also help if there's any troubleshooting that you have to do. So sometimes you might get a new bag of grain and it may not absorb as much water. So you may need to use a little bit less water or a little bit more flour. So it's just important to kind of understand how your dough should look, how your dough should feel. Again, if you guys have any questions, comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching.